So I think we'll begin now. I'll be moderating today's session. I welcome all of you to the special session of the Dark. We call it the Dark Baithak. As most of you are aware, we started this series of conversations and lecture series 2 months ago, where every Saturday at 4 p.m. we invite a subject expert who speaks to us about some of the work that they've been doing. And we then engage with that work and that scholarship in a serious and sustained manner. I welcome, therefore, welcome back a lot of you who've been part of these discussions for the last couple of meetings. Today we have, and I'm delighted to invite a very honored speaker. Today we have Dr. Krishanu Neog with us. I was mentioning it before starting the formal session that I've known Krishanu for a while in a formal capacity. He used to be a co-researcher at Center for Political Studies. And the first time that I got acquainted with Krishanu's work was in the CPS Young Scholars Conference, where he presented a paper. And I think from there onwards, I've closely watched some of the things that he's been saying, and he's been writing about memes and political culture, which I'll leave for him to talk to you about. But to formally introduce and invite Krishanu to this discussion, Dr. Krishanu Neog is working as an assistant professor in the Jagirod College, Assam. He obtained his doctorate from the Center for Political Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. His research has revolved around politics in the digital and online spaces, especially through visual means, as well as questions of political quote-unquote style and populism. CHETNA, who has agreed to be our discussant today, is a very young, dynamic, student, scholar, who has finished her graduation from Hindu College and has secured herself a position in the Center for Political Studies as a master's student. I think she'll be starting shortly. CHETNA, I want to tell everybody, including Krishanu, has been following this work, and she's also been the anchor of the Dark Reading Club, which we've been running for the last 2 years. Not only has CHETNA helped anchor the club, she also reads with us and is also part of the editorial team at TheDaak. So on that note, I will let Krishanu introduce his subject, his topic. The abstract has been there for us. We've also engaged with your reading, with the readings of your work. And we open the session. You have, Krishanu, 30 minutes to talk to us. Of course, we'd like to hear more from you. But within 30 minutes, I think we'll get the crux of what you're saying. And if you want to overshoot that time by 5 minutes, that's also possible. After which we go to CHETNA, who will then have her inputs in way of, an undergrad, postgrad student's way of, entering the domain that you've been working on. And then after that response, we'll open up the session for, our participants. And then from there, we'll take on a number of questions as and when you want to, if you want to answer questions one by one, or you want to take a couple of them together. This is going to be the format. We are actually, because my internet is a little unstable, so instead of live streaming the session, we are recording it, and we'll eventually put it right after the session. We'll put it on YouTube for viewers who may have missed it because of other commitments to catch up. So on that note, Krishanu, you'll start now. We start at 4:10. I welcome you. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Jigyasa, and thank you to the entire DAAK team. I'm sure a lot of labor has gone into preparing these sessions, not just mine, but the others as well over time. And I'd like to congratulate Chetna on her new journey in the Center for Political Studies. I mean, I'm almost a little envious, thinking of the journey you have ahead of you as a postgraduate and then a doctoral student, probably. Good afternoon, everyone who has kindly joined us here today. And I'm Dr. Krishanu Bhargav Neog, and I will, I think, straight away jump into the subject. So let me begin with trying to understand what a meme is. Now, the origin of this word lies in genetics, and then it has come to cultural anthropology, and then slowly it has made its way into media studies as after the advent of social media platforms. Now, it is important to remember here that when we say a meme, we are talking about a particular instance or a particular iteration of a meme. The best way to understand this sort of difficult to grasp concept is, for instance, if we take a reel or a YouTube video on our smartphones, and when we touch our smartphone screens, it pauses for a bit and we have a snapshot. So the way in which I have researched memes has been this. I take a particular instance and delve into it and so on and so forth. It is apparent in my paper as well. But scholars have have been very strident in their arguments that we have to also keep in mind that memes are not just a single iteration. A meme is in a process of flux. It is always flowing. There are different iterations being uploaded in various parts of the world, uploaded and transmitted at any moment of time. So it is sort of like taking a snapshot of a river flowing. That is usually how we study memes. Those of us who are engaged in this subject. Now, coming into what is a meme? Well, we usually understand it as a image, very commonly, or a video that has been circulated a lot on the internet. But here we have to differentiate between memes and what we consider viral content. So memes involve agency. It involves work put in by ordinary users like you and me into, you know, including our own messages in particular instances of a meme. So the difference here between virality and memes being that memes change over time. From user to user, there's a potential in memes to change. Whereas viral content can be transmitted as they are to millions of nodes in a network. Methodologically speaking, theoretically speaking, when we study memes, we usually use the theoretical frameworks given to us by Limor Schiffman and then Ryan Milner. And Limor Schiffman in her work has defined memes as following. It is a media text that has been transmitted widely on the internet. It has been also worked upon widely on the internet. Various people have made various changes to it over time. And memes have three important components that we have to bear in mind when we are studying them. Memes have content, as in the kind of ideas that they are trying to transmit. Memes have form, in the sense, is it an image? Is it a video? What kind of components have gone into it? Where have they drawn from? Is it more cartoonish, or is it, for example, using a certain snip from a Bollywood movie, a certain snippet, etc., etc.? That is the form. Then finally we come to the what we call the stance or the standpoint of a meme. This is where most of the political implications also arise when it comes to studying memes. As in, who is addressing us through that meme? Who is doing the talking? And who is being addressed? Who is being included in this joke? Because a meme might, and it often is, at the expense of someone. It is poking fun at someone or something. So who is being included in that humor? Who is the butt of the joke? Who is the target of the joke? And so on and so forth. And then we also have the tone of a meme. It could be sarcastic. It could also be very misogynistic or racist, and so on and so forth. It could be ironical. Now that we have established some sort of definitions of memes, I'd like to delve more into my paper, which the editors have shared already. So in this paper, I wanted to, sort of explore how politics and identities are entangled with memes, especially political memes. In my own work, I have always delved into memes which overtly deal with politics. Now, here again, I have to, I'll keep making these detours during my lectures from time to time. I'll make a detour now. And this is something I have not mentioned in my paper, but I have included it in my research work in other places. Memes need not always be political, of course. So there is an implicit politics to them when it comes to inclusion and exclusion, like I have mentioned in the case of its standpoint. They can also be overtly political, the kind of memes I have included in my paper to study. But the the potential for memes to be political or to be used for politics lies in the fact that one, they can be easily repurposed by people on the internet. You just need a smartphone and an app where you can, edit images or videos. And the fact that a meme is usually very innocent. It flies under the radar. We do not consider it as a threat. We just transmit it or receive it ourselves from others. It's something funny. We have a laugh about it. So these very things that make memes so easy to transmit, to make, to talk about is also the thing that makes memes have a certain political potential, because if a certain meme template or a format has been used to transmit, for example, say the problems one faces in one's professional life or one's romantic life, the same format can one day be very easily within seconds transformed into something that is used for a political purpose. A cat may be talking about the problems we face in our day-to-day commute, for example. That very meme can be used to talk about our love lives, but that very memes featuring a cat can then be used to talk about politics. And no one would be the wiser because no one can predict when that transformation is going to happen. So a scholar named Ethan Zuckerman called it long time ago, in around 2011-12, during the times of the Arab Spring. He called it the cute cats theory of digital revolution. So the very things that may help us in our everyday lives, help us in a very banal way in our everyday lives, in our conversations online, can be used for politics rather than something very overtly political being used. Now, in my paper, I wanted to explore political identities, questions of inclusion and exclusion, and how they can happen through memes. For this, I picked two Facebook groups which have a huge number of following. And one of them is the Frustrated Indian, which has over 1 million followers. The other is Unofficial Subramaniam Swami. Now, again, I'm going to make a detour here. Unofficial Subramaniam Swami is no longer available. By the time my paper was published, it has shut down because Muhammad Zubair has been entangled in court cases. He had to shut down that particular Facebook page. The Frustrated Indian is still running. The editorial people, attached with the Frustrated Union are part of a larger online digital publishing effort, which includes, I think, Op India and other such pages. So Frustrated Indian is part of that family. So through this first thing I wanted to look at is how is nation talk happening here. So nation talk is a concept coined by Sahana Udupa, where she talks about how are conversations about national identity, national belonging, etc. happening on Indian cyberspaces. And she found that it is mostly led by middle class Indians, usually upper caste, and usually conversing in English or Hindi or one of the major vernacular languages. I haven't explored as much the digital cultures down south. And from that, through a certain amount of sampling and so on, I took certain memes to continue my investigation. Now, again, coming to the point that I had raised earlier, that we have to view memes as part of a flow, not as we cannot always look at them as a particular instance. Methodologically, it could also mean that instead of doing what I did in my paper, one can also take a particular format and see how it has evolved over time or evolved over space in different contexts. That is, I think, called iconographic tracking. It is a evolving methodology. That is also something can be done. So when I pursued my questions about identity and belonging, when it comes to this nation talk, this conversations happening online in India through memes, I found that I had to contend with this fact that a meme it doesn't just exist in isolation. It is part of a particular circulation. So circulation becomes an important part of my understanding of memes. And how does circulation impact the formation of identities? Can it lead to inclusions and exclusions? And how is it happening? For this, I needed to go back a bit out of strictly media studies and look at sociological and political literature, going to the works of, say, Charles Taylor, Benedict Anderson, Jürgen Habermas, and so on, and those who have used their work in contemporary times. So we usually think of, say, for example, an image or a meme as something that is a representation of reality. It represents reality and it refers to reality. So it has a referential function. But what these scholars are telling us about is the ability of these materials in circulation to lead to these new kinds of social formations in themselves. So instead of just being representational, they were also creating something. They were not just a representation, they were not just something used to refer to something else. They are also creating something through circulation. And the paper that I found most useful for this purpose was by Edward Lee Puma and Benjamin Lee, where they use inputs from Charles Taylor and structural anthropology and Marxist political economics to talk about how circulation has its own forms of reflexivity, how it has its own constraints, and so on and so forth. When it comes to memes in terms of circulation, we have to bear in mind that a meme, like I said, has a standpoint. It is always talking to someone. So it is important to notice who is this audience. And in this audience, there is a creation of a certain community, or at least the feeling of a community, that this particular meme, which I can identify, I can talk about, which I can transmit to other people. It is comprehensible to me. It resonates with my life world. I am one of the audience that this meme is talking to, and secondly, this meme is also talking to other people like me. So then there is a plurality. Isn't just me, there are other people like me. So I'm part of a collective. So it already is giving rise to this feeling of a collective, which can go on to become a community. Or scholars have argued that, if not a community in the strict sociological sense or in the quote unquote offline sense, at least it gives rise to a feeling of community. Through this circulation, we see a certain concretization of identities when certain features that we associate with certain groups, religious identities, religious groups, or it could also be sexual minorities, it could be genders, and so on and so forth. It could be ethnic minorities. It could also be talking about class in a strictly Marxist sense. It is through this circulation of memes that we see that the identifying features of a particular community is being formed. And this is, of course, not just restricted to memes. It could also be, through cinema, through literary texts, and so on and so forth. And because memes, given their origins, now I'll not digress too much into the origin of memes. Memes always have this antagonistic quality to them. Like I said before, the humor in memes is often at the expense of someone else. So somebody is laughing at the expense of someone else. Someone else is the target. So memes, through this dynamic of inclusion and exclusion, can reinforce structural, features of a particular community. In my uh, paper, I have used mostly examples of religious communities, Hindus and Muslims in India. So with time, as circulation increases, we find that, this is how the particular community is being identified. So again, going back to an earlier point, it is not just circulation is not just for the transmission of content. It is not just for circulation of meaning, but rather circulation itself gives rise to meaning, to new meanings and new identities. So that was the fundamental point I was trying to make through my paper. That memes, do not just function politically through their meanings, but what happens to memes during circulation leads to new and new, conflicts over identities, because memes are created by ordinary users like you and me. So there can be other users who can question this particular discourse I have set up through the circulation of memes. And that in turn gives rise to what we might call political discourse on the internet. Because memes come with this feeling of, since its earliest days, from the sort of corners of the internet where memes arose, they have come with this feeling of superiority. I have made this point, this arguments against someone else, and I have beaten that person. And I have emerged on top. I actually, if I could for a moment share my screen, I can't seem to find the share option here. Uh, Dr. Jigyasa, could you? Oh, I found it now. Wait, just a moment.
You should be able to share with the green arrow.
Yes, yes. Just a moment.
Take your time.
So this is a meme I wanted to show. I don't know if the
We can see this. We can see it.
yeah. I hope you can also sort of enlarge it a little bit. Yes, this is much better. So this is a particular genre of memes. I wanted to show this because it gives a very idea of this fundamental quality of memes, which is superiority, that one tries to show one of as superior compared to the person that one is antagonizing with. So it says, la la la, I just portrayed you as the soy jack. So the soy jack is the character on the left. This is a particular genre of memes, and me as the Chad, and the Chad is the one on the right. So the Soyjak is usually portrayed as someone who's crying and someone who's pathetic, and the Chad is, the strong and the winner sort of character. So memes can be very self-aware at times, and I found this to be a very interesting example. And at the bottom we see that it says, it's too late for you, I won, you lost, I'm right, you were wrong, la 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 la. So this sort of sentiment is very prevalent in memes, and we also see it in the memes I have sort of used in my paper. And in political terms, this need not necessarily only about political ideologies, but it can also unfortunately mean political identities, certain groups, religious groups, ethnic groups, linguistic groups, gendered groups, sexual groups, etc. So going further from this, it is not, this entire process is not very static, because with each iteration of a meme, say dealing with the question of religious belonging in India, of who actually is an Indian, what does it mean to say one is an Indian in religious terms, With each iteration, one can reinforce structural, stereotypes, or it can also question them. So each iteration is sort of a negotiation with boundary making, the boundaries that are created through circulation. Over time, these stereotypes get embedded one on top of the other, and then we have a certain idea of a community. But suddenly, a set of memes comes in and then questions this, sort of pushes the boundaries of what the identity of a particular community is. And then we can have a sort of what we call agonistic encounter or antagonistic encounter, where each side tries to prove itself to be the right one. And that is something we see in the memes in the paper I have submitted. And I sort of throughout that paper continue in this vein, what kind of contestations we see over the questions of belongingness to India in different forms, in different religious manifestations. How does one belong to India? How can one said to be an how can one say that I am an Indian in various through various religions? Uh, Going further from here, the ease with which circulation happens for memes, that also depends upon its forms. Till now, I have been talking about its contents, the idea of the memes in my paper, which deal with the question of belongingness and religious identity in India. The form is also important in the sense what kind of components one is using. If I use components from Bollywood movies, for a large chunk of India, Eastern India, Western India, Northern India, maybe not so much towards the South, it will be easily accessible to people. People will be able to understand it. And this does not even require formal literacy of the sort that is required, to read a political pamphlet or to read the newspapers. Now, earlier scholars such as Habermas and Anderson, they focused a lot on, print media, which is very, very textual. But for a meme that includes characters from Bollywood, even somebody without formal education can understand it. So this is another important part of what sort of lubricates the circulation of memes. These formal features that draws a lot from popular culture. And sometimes these components are so very strong, people identify so strongly with them. Say, for example, the character of Babu Bhaiya from Bollywood. It's very easily recognizable and has a lot of emotive force. So, when we talk about religious identity through a meme featuring, Babu Bhaiya, one, it will find a widespread audience, and two, it will have a certain impact or a force that Anirban Kapil Vaishya calls an intertextual relay. The components themselves also have a force. So this circulation then we see that is happening, of contents, of forms. It leads to it leads to a certain power dynamic. It is not divorced from power. It is not innocent to power. So going back to the question of memes being innocent, of being banal, which we have used in our title, in the title of our session today, the memes are banal artifacts. It appears that memes are perhaps not so banal. They have a particular political potential or valence that can be very easily used for exclusion and inclusion. And I'm sorry, I forgot to mention this part, the part about for performativity. So going back again to the question of circulation. So performativity is usually attached with the with giving words to new meaning, whereas the transmission of this meaning is usually associated with circulation. But what I try to argue with in this paper, through the empirical material of memes as well as through the theoretical arguments, is that circulation and performativity are very closely intertwined. That again, going back to my earlier argument, that it is through the circulation that we find newer and newer meanings arising. Uh, I think I can end my introductory remarks here. Before going further, I would like to hear more from the interlocutors. That would make for a more lively conversation as well. And I might have forgotten parts, and the conversation might make me remember them. So I would like to conclude my introductory remarks here, and I would love to hear the comments of the discussants.
Thank you so much, Dr. Neog. There seems to be a conceptual framing that you've already done for us in terms of the working definitions of what is it that we are dealing with, and to then open up the conversation, wherein we say, well, is it truly as banal, or are there other things that are working in a meme? I would now request, thank you so much, Dr. Neog. I would now request Chetna Rani to come in and maybe a short takeaway of what you could make sense of it and how you made sense of it, and probably if you have questions for you to pose them. Thank you.
Am I audible? Thank you, Dr. Neog. I am very interested in pop culture and media, so your paper was very, it really catered to my interests and I loved reading it. For the participants, I would really request everyone to, so the link to the drive where the paper is posted has been given in the chat box. I would really request everyone to open it and access the paper, because this is a discussion based on visual media. So it would be best if we are able to see what we're actually talking about. So, sir, in one of the memes, it's about which it opposes Nehru and Gandhi, and in one of the memes from the dominant Hindutva groups, which is the Frustrated India account, you show that when Jinnah requests for a separate Muslim states, Gandhi agrees, but when Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel puts the same request that India should have a culturally, religiously Hindu bent, Gandhi refuses. So these memes that vilify Gandhi, they as an appeaser of the Muslim community, they are from the notion of from the perspective of the dominant Hindu groups who feel that they've been aggrieved. So this is one side of the paradigm. I want to know, how do you think that what kind of counter publics have been created by other liberal or secular pages, and do the memes that they put forward contest the dominant ideology of this Hindutva sect, which see that, oh, okay, our leaders in the past, Nehru and Gandhi, have been appeasers of Muslims and they have not catered to the Hindu interest as much. Do you think that liberal secular pages are able to contradict or put forward alternate perspectives? Also, in extension to this, when I was thinking about liberal and secular groups, I also thought that memes have now become a platform for disenfranchised groups. So like marginalized groups that were hitherto robbed of a voice. So in popular media now they too have a stake. They too can express their ideas. So do you think their memes are able to effectively challenge the dominant structures, or are they just co-opted into the paradigm that the Hindutva groups have created? So this is one. I have multiple questions. So I will go first with one, and I would like you to elaborate more on that. I hope I was lucid enough to make sense.
No, yes, I understood your questions, and Chetna, you're quite lucid enough. Thank you. Well, one section of my paper, I did not go into this during my remarks, goes into historical revisionism. This, history as a new battlefield, sort of. Now, I did not go into depth in this because that a historian would be more, it would be better place to handle this, talking about textbooks and, popular media, cinema, Bollywood, etc. I went into it only through memes. Yes, there have been counter memes to that. I have actually included them in my PhD thesis. This exact conversation about Gandhi and Vallabhbhai Patel, especially. So Gandhi and Nehru on one side, and Jinnah is one other side, and then there's Vallabhbhai Patel. So what these liberal secular groups do is they then make memes showing Nehru and Vallabhbhai Patel getting along very well. where they are having deep discussions. And they talk about how, oh, look at these new young boys without any education, without any, proper idea of history. And they're making us into, these sort of antagonistic figures who hated each other, while the truth, this could not be further from the truth. So yes, they have sort of pushed back against this narrative of, especially around these figures of Gandhi, Nehru, and Vallabhbhai Patel. Uh, Gandhi, but it is important to remember, and I'd like to segue into the second question through this. Gandhi is also a polarizing figure, and all three of us are political science, people here. And in our undergraduate days itself, we read about the Gandhi Ambedkar debates. So marginalized groups, yes, a lot of queer groups, a lot of Dalit meme groups, meme communities are in existence, and they have been pushing back against not just the Hindutva narrative, but also the dominance of the secular liberal sort of groups on the other hand. Uh, a lot of them are on Facebook, just Savarna memes, Savarna fat cats, amongst others. I've forgotten their names. Yes, there are a lot of uh, you know meme communities from hitherto marginalized communities that make very sharp, biting commentary. Uh, in terms of how effective they are, it depends again on the maker, and it all goes back to the question of vernacular sort of how do I call it? Vernacular literacy. So not formal literacy, but vernacular popular culture literacy. If you can make a meme that connects with, say, lower income groups, working class people from marginalized communities, from lower castes, then you are able to make an effective counter. If you make too theoretical a point, you might not get across. Although a lot of these marginalized, Facebook pages. For example, there's Inedible India, which was started by Bangalore-based. I think he worked in the corporate sector. His name is Rajesh Rajamani. He started this page which features, and its characteristic feature is the are drawings by Raja Ravi Verma, and then he makes commentaries on caste and gender in India. So and it got really popular, but then again, it comes back to a point I made in my paper through Sahana Udupa, that it, you know, it would make more sense to a middle class audience, which is very tech savvy. Middle class audience of all, middle class, well educated audience of all castes. Now, when it comes to working classes, I do not know how effective it would be. But again, keeping in mind how fast paced, the dynamics of the internet are, like I said, by the time my paper got published, unofficial Subramaniam Swami had been shut down. And in my paper, I focused mostly on middle class, both these groups, Frustrated Indian and Unofficial Subramaniam Swami, have a pronounced middle class bent. It's for people who are well educated and know a bit of history and so on. Especially since the advent of TikTok in India, and TikTok has since then been banned. But it opened the floodgates, and now there are a lot of scholarly works as well, which has looked at, people from marginalized sections, both socially and economically, who use their own idioms, their own vernacular to reach a very wide audience, especially through YouTube. Now that TikTok, unfortunately, is no longer around in India. So you'll find people all across the country, even engaged in daily wage labor, very eagerly going through their YouTube feeds, looking at various humorous videos which talk not just about, the quote unquote light topics, but also heavier topics about the economy, politics, society, and so on. So we have these two sort of parallel trends, of marginalized groups. One that is more vernacular, one that is more sort of cosmopolitan. So that is how I would put it.
Uh, Thank you, sir. So you talked about middle classes. The memes that are produced are generally from the middle classes, and they are palatable for the middle class. And so
Right.
then the middle class then acts as a gatekeeper of what kind of discourse will be created through memes. So in the nation talk and the God talk, that emerges. It is from the viewpoint of the middle class. So then how would you frame that? What is this nationalism of the middle class? And do do other groups, do the lower middle classes have a different form of nationalism that if given the access to, if not for the digital divide, if they were given access to, would they be able to sort of produce or percolate a different form of nationalism? So what is the nationalism of the middle class that it puts forward?
Uh, in response to this question, I would like to draw on this particular word that you used, palatable. So you might see that when groups like Unofficial Subramaniam Swami and Frustrated Indian, very middle class in their orientation, put forwards their views, it is very sanitized, you know, so that it is palatable. The same might not be the case when one explores more, vernacular memes or vernacular media content. It might be a bit rougher around the edges, but that instead that might just make them more sort of agreeable to their target demographics. And here we have to remember that while the middle class orientation might want a very ordered, structured ideological, output, ideology, when we study it as a concept, we see that people have very contradictory notions. So somebody might, be in favor of more caste mobility, more equality, caste as a factor going away from Indian society. The same person might also think that women should not step out of the house, sort of. So you have these contradictory claims coexisting. And this is in the nature of ideology. If you look at the works of people like Ernesto Laclau and others, ideology is usually patching together, sewing together some very contradictory viewpoints and trying to mobilize together. Because I'm interested in populism, these are the sort of concepts I work with. So that would be my guess. But here I'm speaking as someone who has not really researched memes coming from the margins. I'm calling them the margins, but at the same time, these memes might have an even bigger audience. And we get a clue for about this when we look at YouTube channels, especially vernacular YouTube channels. Their followers go into millions. Their views, the number of counts they get, always in millions. But we might not even know about them as academics. So that is the kind of difference I see broadly.
So could you please repeat the name of the scholar that you referenced? We'd love to, I
Uh,
think, go back to them. When you were talking about ideas being channelized right now, you referenced to a work of a scholar.
Ernesto Laclau, Ernesto, Ernesto Laclau.
Okay, thank you, sir. I will surely go
And
back to
I'm
them.
sure in course of your postgraduate studies, you will read Ernesto Laclau at some point.
Looking forward to it.
Hmm.
One
If I may
question,
just take a moment here again, just
of
a
course,
minute.
of course.
Ernesto Laclau is interesting in case of memes because he's talking about, sort of patching together. He uses the term sewing. So, silai karna. Silai karke, you patch together a particular ideology which might have very contradictory elements. And we see the same thing in memes because you draw your components of a meme from various different quarters. And that particular component, you might want to make a very progressive message, but that particular content might have a very regressive message, but you are remixing it for your own purposes. So all of these things, uneasily coexist with one another. That is why I found, Ernesto Laclau very interesting. And together with his longtime collaborator Chantal Mouffe, he has this concept called articulation. So not the dictionary meaning of the term, but he has this concept of articulation that you might find very interesting. Why articulation is always partial, why there's always space left for contestation, and so on and so forth.
Thank you, sir. So, one last question that I was thinking is with reference to the 2024 general elections. The
Okay.
memes that were being circulated last year around the elections, they formed a sort of cultural zeitgeist, a watershed moment, which has again made how the general public consumes the political process very digestible, very palatable. People who may not be as engrossed or who may not be able to understand jargonistic results and all, they are still able to gain access to what's actually happening in the country. So, do you think that now memes as a mode of political historiography, which you mentioned, that is a term that I've taken from your paper, do you think that in the future, because the memes is a study that is very participatory, very emotional, it is very integrative. Do you think that then memes as a tool of popular historiography challenges the epistemic authority of academia? Do you think that it challenges the way that we see history? Because so memes focus on affect, the feeling part of it. Do you think that it challenges written history, codified history, which has been sort of combined through archival research or the history of the academicians? Do you think that it can pose a challenge to it, or do you think it can be integrated to it to support it, assist it? Or do you think there is a juxtaposition, divide between these two? I'm just thinking
Right.
out loud that can
Okay.
memes be bigger? That you said they're
Mhm.
not banal, and they're not. So RK Lakshman's cartoons, they are now given in CBSE textbooks. So can we envision something like that for memes in the future?
Uh, Regarding that particular example you used, R.K. Lakshman, so here we have an author. So we have, a particular cultural content that we can fix to an author. With memes, it's important to understand that we can't always know who the author is. Although in our age, with all the surveillance our social media platforms are under, you know, it seems like a very strange notion, but anonymity has already always been an important part of memes. So integrating memes would become difficult because you wouldn't know whom to cite. So you have websites like Know Your Meme, which sort of does this tracing of where a meme first came about, who first used it, what was the online handle of that user, and so on and so forth. But memes do not have that sort of editorial oversight. Again, coming back to that word palatable, which might make it palatable for academia or for official historiography. But coming back to the question of challenging official historiography, I don't think memes are the only ones doing that. You have an entire film industry now that sort of seems to be working in that direction. So official historiography, especially of the secular nationalist sort, has always been a bugbear of the Hindutva right, and it is facing a very stiff challenge, not just in academia but also in popular culture. More than memes, I seem to recall scenes from last year I saw online where people were singing and chanting slogans in cinema halls. So movies are, if not more, just as strong as memes. But again, movies can be criticized in the sense, you have movie reviews talking about them. They are still a bit official. With memes, we still have this flying under the radar, this banality, because you do not know what is circulating in WhatsApp groups. Like I did my research on Facebook and Twitter. I have not done my research on WhatsApp, and I can say this with some amount of confidence that research into Facebook and Twitter is a bit redundant now. The actual game is playing out in WhatsApp, and that is methodologically challenging because how do you gain access to WhatsApp groups? Family WhatsApp groups, community WhatsApp groups. So a lot of research, say for instance, on misinformation and disinformation is now happening over WhatsApp rather than other social media platforms. So these are some of the challenges and important aspects that I think we have to bear in mind going forward. We already have case studies of how WhatsApp influences politics, and memes are a part of that. I don't think people have looked particularly into memes on WhatsApp, but they have looked at the part WhatsApp plays in politics, especially elections in, say, Philippines, elections in Sri Lanka, elections in India, elections in Brazil. So these four countries, very interestingly, all from the global south, have been very thoroughly studied in terms of how WhatsApp plays a part in challenge in politics by challenging official historiography. In the Philippines case, we see this new generation of Filipinos being completely sort of under the sway of a new historiography, because the older generation remembers the dictatorship of the Marcos, but the newer generation thinks those dictators did a very good job. While it is the new, after the dictatorship was over, they had democracy again. They say that democracy is the problem. Those dictators did a better job of governing the country. So that sort of dynamic we see in play.
So, like you said, from this example, it is important to note how memes can also shape memory, how we remember the past. And it may not always be accurate. It may not be actually the events that had unfolded, but because of visual memory that we hold, it shapes how we remember the truth or the past. And thank you so much. I think that is all the questions I have. There are multiple questions that I can see in the chat box. So that is all from my end. We'd love if you could take them.
Thank you, Chetna. Thank you for your insightful questions.
Thank you, Chetna, for the questions that you've raised. It comes from a place of inquisitive reading, but also engaging with popular culture that Chetna seems to be interested in. And thank you, Dr. Neog, for those. I've always felt, and I'll take 20 seconds here. I've always
No,
felt that, in fact,
please.
yeah, I remember the first time and because we all well, some of us are aware of Professor Gopal Guru. I was talking to him about some of my MPhil work, and he said, Jigyasa, if you cannot explain it to a student, if you cannot explain it to a 15-year-old, if it cannot be said in one line, then you don't have a proposal, you don't have an idea. So I think the fact that you were able to, I think Dr. Neog was able to give its most simplest version, which makes it accessible to undergrad students, I think is a skill to kind of learn. And I had a moment here when he said, oh, but things have moved, and if you want to do research now, you need to move to WhatsApp. And if I may add, also to Instagram chats. I think a whole lot of that is now moved to Instagram chats and WhatsApp. And the problem with that is then the privacy, because people have also now understood that why not do these on chat then doing them on Facebook pages, which are far more open and public. On that note, we have 3 questions that I can see in the chat box. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read them out, and let's hope that I'm able to. Yeah. So I think Rishav says, thank you, Dr. Krishanu and TheDaak, for the talk. Myself, Rishav, pursuing masters at CPS. Okay. My question revolves around your methodology. How does the purposive sampling impact the generalizability of the study's claims about meme culture and national identity? Would employing more advanced digital ethnographic tools or scraping techniques have yielded deeper or more diverse insights?
Shall I address this question first?
I think we could address this first and then move on.
Hello, Rishabh. Rishabh, thank you for your question. It is actually very interesting. So I would divide my response into 2 parts. Digital ethnographic tools and scraping techniques. So I'll go with scraping techniques first. So you will find a lot of literature around memes that have used this in the past. Scraping techniques, you need an API to do that basically. And the problem with API, unfortunately, is that these social media platforms, Meta especially, and Twitter, or X as it is now known, keeps shutting off these APIs that lets you scrape data. So for scraping techniques, you need to have some funding behind you, which lets you buy data. So for example, you could buy 100,000 tweets or so on and so forth. So that is the deal with scraping techniques. It's not something that I'm very familiar with, but I have, seen people do it, especially in institutions like Indraprastha Institute of Information and Technology. They deal with large volumes of data, or big data as it is now known. Digital ethnographic tools, again, very interesting. This particular methodology, I think, goes back to Christine Hines and others who spend a lot of time online in, you know, spend a lot of time online and also spend a lot of time in these communities, in these online communities, to see how they operate. So how does meaning making happen? How does boundary making happen? How is norm enforced? So digital ethnographic, methodologies could be very fruitful. And even in my case, I would say that it involves some amount of, ethnography, in the sense I would claim my research has been ethnographically informed. It's not an ethnography, but I could do my research only by prolonged, exposure to these particular communities, years and years of every day going through these pages, looking at the conversations, looking at the style of memes, what kind of memes are popular and what is being said, what is the hot topic for discussion, and so on. So I'd say to a certain extent, my research has been, ethnographically informed, although I wouldn't call it an ethnography, which is a very specific methodology used by sociologists and anthropologists. But yes, digital ethnography would give you a lot more insights. And there are a lot of both old and new scholarship in this regard. When I say old, it's actually not, I don't mean the 1950s or 1970s. I mean 2000s, early 2000s. When I say new, I mean like 2018 onwards and so on. So yes, they would give you more diverse, they would yield more diverse insights.
Thank you, Krishanu. I think within the social media lexicon, new essentially means a year.
Yeah.
Old essentially means 2 years ago. And new
Yes,
was something that happened
absolutely.
yesterday. I think the subject matter changes so fast that new and old is a very immediate short history. Okay, moving on to the next question. Pratham writes. He says very interesting. He says hello, and then he says very interesting talk. I have two questions. Of late, we've also seen major political parties using memes, be it the India Bloc or BJP. How do memes change the way political communication and campaigning pans out? That is one part, campaigning and political communication. The second question he's asking is, I was also wondering about the intersection of memes, affect, and violence. How do we see the circulation of memes coinciding with circulation of hate? Something that Sarah Ahmed talks about. Those are Pratham's two questions. He's also part of the editorial team at TheDaak.
Okay. Hello, Pratham. Thank you for the questions. Uh, Political communication, right? So, if you look at at my bibliography in my paper, the kind of people I've talked about, among them, especially Professor Sahana Udupa, I had the good fortune of working under her once in a project. She has done what Rishabh had asked in the previous question: deep ethnographic engagement with these communities, online communities, which are very political, which either support, the right wing or the left wing, or however we want to put it. So she has found that there is a very sort of volunteeristic outlook amongst these participants. They want to be a part of these efforts because it is no longer the old political activism of just pamphlets and very serious people, activistic kind of people talking a certain way. Now it is a lot more quote unquote fun. Political activism is a lot more fun, especially through something like memes. So, you can get a lot people who are a lot more younger into your campaigns. And because memes are so popular in our everyday lives, they are used by advertising agencies. So why should, political parties be left behind? So they also get into it quite often. I see on Twitter the head of the BJP IT cell or the Congress party often sharing memes, criticizing their oppositions. So yes, and on top of that, now that we have something like what Prashant Kishore started, of organizations that you can hire, that you can pay money to do your political communication for you. You have very strategic messaging, almost like an advertising agency. So such people can easily hire young, creative talent who can make quote unquote dank, edgy memes that have a lot of circulation and can get the media across. So we will see that even more and more. We already see that to a very large extent. We'll see that even more and more in the coming days. So that voluntary aspect, and Sahana Udupa traces it back to again the emergence of the new middle class in India, where you had this sort of notion of civic activism that one should be very active or should be very actively engaged in changing the state of the country through one's own agency rather than being associated with a political party sort of thing. So it is part of a larger political economic shift, social shift in the country that we have seen since the 1990s, and how it has changed both the mainstream media scape as well as the digital media scape. So that is how I put it. So yes, Dr. Shahana Udupa's work you might find very interesting. Memes and effects. Sarah Ahmed would have been my first go-to person to talk about effect, because she also talks about circulation. And so again, it is not just about one particular instance of a meme or one particular person expressing a particular emotion. It is through the circulation of me. So like Sarah Ahmed says, it's not a, you know, feelings and emotions are not something that is interior to us. It is generated in us through circulation. So I am not an expert, full disclosure, on affect and emotions. I think Dr. Jigyasa might want to pitch in here. And yes, that is how hatred is circulated in online spaces, through circulation and through very banal ways, because humor and hate can work very well together hand in hand, as I am sure all of us have seen in online spaces. Uh, we can, of course, continue this discussion later on, but I would very much like it if Dr. Jigyasa could also pitch in when it comes to talking about emotion and effect.
No, I think I mean, the ball is in my court. I get that, but I think you've kind of answered what I would have, also said, that there's a certain way in which and I also think the stickiness of it. I think it's through the meme that, again, using Sarah Ahmed's, phrase, that probably meme helps emotions stick. And then
Yes.
there's a certain way in which then, emotions are reflected back, as you mentioned in your in your lecture also, that the sense of community gets refurbished when you find a meme that speaks of your condition. And then, it's not just me, there are several others who have the same condition. And one doesn't have to go to, say, religion for it. I mean, the famous Mughal memes that did the round on Instagram and all of it. And I remember that in this particular thing, Salim is asking Anarkali to get up, Anarkali, ud jao, PhD jama karna hai. And I realized, and around that time I was also had my PhD due, and what you found was this: oh, I'm not the only one. Even Salim and Anarkali are now in the project of getting my PhD submitted. So the stickiness, I think, comes through probably in this case. I mean, if I were to read it like that, I have no expertise on memes and humor, but if I were to think of effect in terms of its stickiness of certain concepts, certain ways, then I think probably what memes do then is they probably, Pratham, if we're to think out loud, would probably help us with that stickiness bit of effect, and then from which then the effect gets circulated, as I think Krishanu just mentioned. But I think that is all from my
If
side.
I may add just a little tidbit over here, another thing about memes is when it comes to effect, is that they need not necessarily be carriers of new information, in the sense that you already have a predisposed, you know, dislike for a particular community. For example, it might be sexual minorities, and you suddenly get a meme that just reinforces your ideas about them. It doesn't give you any new content or any new ideas. You just, you know, it's sort of like a wink and a nod. So here effect is circulating even without any new information. So it's almost like a rhythm that's going round and round, sort of like a drum circle, you know, provoking people to more and more emotional intensity.
Absolutely agree. I'm in agreement. And from that, I think we need to probably think more in terms of how to look at meme and effect together. Maybe that Pratham could take up that, and maybe in some time we'll hear something that he's written about it. We will now move on to the next questions. I'm sorry, Dr. Neog, you'll have to answer these because I mean it's generated paragraph long questions from people. Ram has written. Is this our Ram Kumar Thakur?
Oh,
I'm assuming it's our Ram. Ram says, thank you, Dr. Krishanu and Chetna, for such an interesting presentation and discussion. I was thinking about the banter that goes around memes, which does not appear as political or is consciously pitched as not political. Do you think, quote unquote, just humor kind of articulation hollows out the ways in which political discourse has been traditionally thought about? This is Ram's question.
Thank you so much, Ram, and thank you so much for being a part of this session. You know, I've really looked up to your work, the kind of work that you have done. This is actually a disciplinary questions, in the sense that the old ways of doing political science research might just not suffice anymore. So you have these more anthropological approaches towards political science, where you are not looking at big events or big campaigns, but looking at what is happening in the everyday lives of people. Again, taking a maybe more ethnographic approach, being part of people's lives and trying to find out how meaning making is happening there. How is there, as Charles Taylor called it, social imaginary being shaped by these new media technologies? And they might have, like you said, might not always come across as political. They might be, for example, the kind of memes that you know, husbands share in their friends group about their wives, complaining about their wives or complaining about women. You have these, this is not something I have researched, but something I've read about, that all these new uh, men's group sort of activists that you see online, which has also strangely made inroads into India, where they might share, you know, gender related memes that might not come across as political, but we of course would recognize them as political. So yes, it has hollowed out ways in which we understand political discourse. For example, the whole argumentative Indian kind of thinking. So yes, we need to take a more anthropological way, I think, when it comes to political discourse. Not just stick to, you know, speeches and texts, but look at these new, you know, forms of thinking about politics, like you have done with your, you know, your work on Bollywood and Dali's representation. So, you know, more fresh air, so to speak, in the discipline of political science.
Interesting, interesting. Akanksha has a question. Thank you for the interesting discussion. She says, recently in India-Pakistan conflict, we've seen many memes circulating around that issue. We saw propaganda building from both nations, Indian people blaming Turkey for going against India despite conducting operation like Operation Dost. Although these memes doesn't have any official position, to what extent do you think somewhere these memes are having the power to shape views and creating right and wrong side of global issues like war, or they are just emotional banter and hold minuscule importance in shaping global view? Let me kind of rephrase the larger question without invoking any particular conflict. I think the sense that Akanksha is coming from is that there are a lot of conflicts. I mean, as we discuss, as we're sitting here, we have parts of the world, embroiled in war or conflicts, and there are then these conversations also going on in social media with respect to memes. And I think the question she's asking is, uh, do they hold weight in terms of setting right from wrong in the larger discourse about global issues? I think that's the question Akanksha is asking.
Thank you, Akanksha. More than right or wrong, I think it's more of an us versus them question that arises through these memes. And of course, us would think we are right and they are wrong. That is usually how things happen on the internet. It's a very antagonistic, space, not so much of deliberation as antagonism. So I would say this is more about us versus them rather than right and wrong, in the sense that we are always right, they are always, of course, wrong, with no sort of middle ground therein. As to how much, what importance they have in shaping global view, that would have to be studied. I don't think that sort of study where you try to find out real world impact of memes has sort of ever been done.
Okay. Another research question then has come out from this discussion. Chetna Anjali is also thanking you for the talk, and probably also TheDaak, hopefully. Says many memes today don't operate at a literal level, which I think you mentioned. They rely on layers of irony that can create a kind of interpretive ambiguity. For example, a meme might show a picture of a woman cooking with the caption "Girl Boss in the kitchen." It is unclear whether it's reinforcing stereotypes, critiquing them, or simply making fun of the discourse itself. How do we methodologically approach such content in a way that accounts for its layered irony?
Thank you, Chetna. Well, this sort of question also throws up, in addition to its methodological aspects, it also throws up ethical aspects. As in, and here this is not, my argument. I'm sort of citing how scholars have gone about this, especially scholars who have studied memes. They sort of make the argument that ironical distance is often used as a sort of shield to protect oneself from criticism, while actually doing some sort of harm through stereotypes. Now, that is how the scholarship has usually understood ironical distancing. The second aspect is that this lack of clarity, this ambiguity is something that researchers have always noticed. You can never be entirely sure that something has been created only for the sake of humor, only for the sake of being playful with boundaries and what is considered palatable or not. Am I transgressing sort of transgressive humor, or does it have a larger end in mind, larger goal, whether it is, some sort of political goal or otherwise? So that sort of ambiguity is always a part of studying such artifacts as memes. So here I would direct you towards the works of Ryan Milner and Wendy Phillips, who have sort of tried to deal with these. They have a book together as well as essay. So Ryan Milner and Wendy Phillips, they have sort of tried to, come up with sort of a pathway for researchers as to how they can deal with this ambiguity. It's something, one can use, but with regards to irony is often used as a shield. Oh, I was just joking. I didn't mean any harm through it. But, by propagating a particular stereotype, harm may have already been done. Again, this is, beyond one individual. It's a matter of circulation and the discourse it gives rise to.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the question also, Chetna Anjali. It was I think, a very well thought out and very sharp question. Are there any other questions, concerns, comments? There seem to be none from the audience. I would, however, if you allow me, Dr. Neog, ask two questions.
Okay.
I was wondering, especially when we're talking about with respect to the last question that you just answered, and even otherwise, I was just wondering, with the new methods of looking at politics and politics, understanding social also really, how do we place the concept of authorial intent, right? That almost all creative works, or just works that seem to involve some amount of um, creativity, also have been thought of in terms of an intent of the author itself. And of course, then we've had, different ways in which, how the book becomes the readers when it actually lands the reader, or the perception of the of the onlooker then completely changes the meaning or the intent that the author had. And when I say author, I don't necessarily mean the written word. I also mean intent that comes with, creativity of all kinds. So in some sense, when we say that one really cannot point out at the author of the meme, right? There definitely is an authorial intent, right? For most parts, by looking at the meme, one can go back and say, well, loosely this was the intention, loosely, right? And then of course, not the kinds that would use irony to then, sell out a lot of things. But how do we understand this, the possibility of authorial intent without really having one author? And which I find is something that's a function when it comes to memes. And then if authorial intent is there, like at least I can speak of a general intent, then what is it that we are working with as far as rooting responsibility is concerned? Like how do we if it was an ideological, say it was not it was, if they were antagonistic competitive publics, right? If we were to think of this as a conversation that the public is doing about public good, and in general about the direction of thought, then how do we, without authorial intent, where do we where do we locate responsibility? And those are my two. And when I say responsibility, I mean the ethics of it. And when I'm talking about authorial intent, how do we look at how do we look at this decoupling of the author and the authorial intent? Those are my two. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jigyasa. These are really deep questions. I would begin with the second part, the responsibility part, and what we see around us in more, rather than an ethical approach, in a more juridical approach, what we see around us. Those in governance or the state usually lays responsibility on the one who has shared. So the authorial intent does not become important in juridical terms. In legal juridical terms, the state, as we know, is more interested in protecting public order, quote unquote. So responsibility then has to be fixed on an individual or a group that can be punished, or and so on and so forth. Penalties can be imposed. With regard to the first part, authorial intent without having an author, where this goes back to the concept of, this meme, I want to speak to a certain audience. And not just that audience, not just speak to them, I am inviting them to be a part of this worldview along with me. So that is an intent we can often, find in these memes, that I'm making a particular meme, for example, say about religious identity. And I am saying that the way this particular religion works is it's a deviation from the norm. And the way I say it, I sort of speak for everyone meaning the majority probably, or everyone who agrees with me that this particular community is acts in a way that is a deviation from the norm. So I've already established what the norm is, what normal is, what the boundaries of, correct behavior is, and I have decided that this particular group of people falls outside it. So that kind of authorial intent in memes can be detected, as in who is sort of doing this particular ventriloquistic act of speaking for the public, speaking for the people, For example, say a meme that deals with sexual minorities or makes fun of them. I'm saying, the meme is saying that I, along with a large group of people, think that this is a deviation from the norm. So that kind of authorial intent can be detected in these memes, and then comes the ethical part of how do we address it. Do we form counter publics to these memes, push our own memes against them, sort of you know popularize our own more inclusive progressive discourses online? So that then becomes the question, but there's also always hanging at the back the juridical question, who, in case something goes wrong, who pays the price?
Thank you. Thank you for that answer.
I mean, I don't think I've done justice to your questions, but these are questions I have to think about.
Absolutely, it's a way of thinking. I mean, you've done more than justice to the topic, and in fact, it's such a new topic, and with you, a lot of us got to kind of think out loud, and I think in a way of thinking, because that is how I was thinking about authorial intent, and I thought I'll pose that question to you, and maybe we could think, together. Vikram, I think, has left a message thanking you for this interesting talk.
Thank you, Vikram. Thank you for being a part of this session.
So we don't have any other questions. And with that, we'll come to the end of the session. We would like to extend on behalf of the entire team at TheDaak, most members of which are right now here, whose names I would like to take. Sanjukta Nath, Sakshi Sharda, Sakshi Vadva, Satvik Raj, Pratham Gupta, Jigisha. So this is a team of editors and the core team of TheDaak. On behalf of the entire team, including Chetna here, we'd like to extend our warm regards, and we're most grateful that Dr. Krishanu Neog took out the time from his busy schedule. He's been doing a lot of work. In fact, he was involved in some of his very important, works that he had to do, because of which we couldn't bring him earlier, but we found an arrangement to bring him now. So thank you so much for coming and speaking to TheDaak. And we will, in the future, meet again next Saturday, where we'll be talking about women and gender in spaces. And for now, that is it. Thank you so much, Krishanu.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jigyasa. And I'd also like to extend my gratitude to the core team of TheDaak, because this would not be possible without a lot of background work, I'm sure. Thank you to everyone who joined in and was a part of this session. Patiently, we did discuss a lot, and I hope it held at least a little bit of interest for everyone. And thank you so much to the editors of TheDaak for being flexible with the timing. I know we had discussed about the middle of June earlier, but unfortunately, a lot of work came up. Our vacations got pushed back, so that was not possible. So thank you again for giving me this opportunity to discuss my work, and for all the thought-provoking questions that were asked.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We will be uploading the recording of the session on YouTube, and we'll be sharing the links with our speaker, with our discussant, and all the members, and on our website for any one of you to have a look at some of the readings and a list of readings, a number of references that Dr. Neog has shared today. And if you want to get in touch with him, please write to us. With his permission, we'll share his email ID with you, and if he'd be willing to engage in answering your questions about this work. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you. Goodbye.